But starting off, we're a couple days late on this, but Apple did have their big event today, their Wonderlust event, which I was confused when it started because of the opening video basically being a bunch of people having their birthday because their iPhones saved their lives by calling 911 when they weren't able to. So Apple is clearly trying to differentiate themselves from the competition, or at least from past them, by caring more about you living than just being a phone. That's the direction that Apple has chosen to head, is basically health and safety, which is fascinating to see because there's so many other directions out there to go. They could be trying to experiment with foldables. They could be pushing AR, VR, and like your phone is your workhorse that you can do everything with and shows you how to fix things. There's so many different ways they could go, but they're choosing to push that on the iPhones at least. Maybe with Apple Pro Vision, we will see something else. But for now, with the iPhones and the Apple Watches, this is where they're heading. So what did Apple completely announce? Just a quick summary of what's really going on here is for the iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max, they have a new titanium design. Instead of a mute switch, they have a action button. The action button by default does mute the device. So it's not a little toggle switch anymore. It's a hold switch. And you actually can customize it to do just about anything through Siri actions, I think is what it's called. Or there's a bunch of other built-in ones. And we'll see if Apple lets other developers expand that in the future as well. But the new colors are black titanium, white titanium, blue titanium, and natural titanium. But no gold this year. The Pro Max now starts at 256 gigabytes of storage for $11.99. The 15 Pro is kind of wild with the new action button, like we said. But the titanium iPhone 15 Pro weighs 19 grams less than the 14 Pro. The 15 Pro is $100 cheaper in the UK last year than its equivalent models. And, you know, the iPhone 15 Pro models technically didn't really change that much. iPhone 15 Pro Max's 5x optical zoom lens enables up to 25x digital zoom, which is a first for Apple to want you to zoom that far intentionally. 15 Pro models will support Wi-Fi 6E. On top of, Apple adds Thread networking technology to the iPhone 15 Pro. Yeah, it's kind of wild what the 15 Pros are getting here this year, including Type-C. So we knew this was kind of coming with the EU pushing them. I was personally hoping for Apple to say a big FU and just say, you know, it's wireless charging. We're just going to release wireless charging. And to be honest, with how fast Apple's wireless charging charges at the moment, it pretty much would have been equivalent if they could match some Android phones to the 20 watts that they're limiting this to anyways. So if you didn't know, Type-C is a bunch of optional specs. So the iPhone 15 is actually kind of getting boned here. Well, the Pro will have a higher data transfer rate, which could be useful for people that shoot a ton of video with their phone. It actually won't charge any faster, which credit to Apple here. Part of this is probably because at the charging speed they allow, your battery will last you longer and will be better for that reason. But nonetheless, it sucks to see them kind of inhibiting the USB Type-C port. It's kind of like they want to just, this year the big change was you got the Type-C. And then next year, maybe they'll bump up the charging speed because Type-C can do that. And maybe you'll be able to limit it in the settings or something, but for now, who really knows? The only thing that's cool about that is the iPhone's 15's USB-C port can charge your Apple Watch and AirPods if you get the new Apple AirPods Type-C case. And there also is, that I didn't see mentioned anywhere, and maybe it is mentioned in this article a little later, but for the AirPods, they actually did get a case update. There's a different one now with a Type-C case. And that one, on Apple's site at least, seems to be the only one that supports lossless audio with the AirPod Vision Pros. I'm not entirely sure why. But anyways, they do. And that's just something to note if you're planning on getting that insanely expensive headset. But the Type-C port is kind of the big deal this year. And that's really the biggest thing they pretty much announced at the entire thing. iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max features increased 8 gigabytes of RAM, as we expected. So the 15 and iPhone 15 Plus, so the regular iPhones. Now, Apple a couple years ago started doing a thing where they got last year's chip on that device, if that makes sense. So with that, we see they did bring the dynamic island to the 15 and 15 Plus. It did get last year's chip. USB-C port remains limited to lightning speeds. That's for transfer Charging is the same on both phones still with Type-C. iPhone 15 models do not come with the rumored matched braided cable, which I don't know why people thought that was really going to happen. And the iPhone 15 models are still limited to 7.5 watts on Qi chargers. Fast charging has not been improved here, which kind of sucks. iPhone models also sold outside of the US will include a SIM card tray. So 15 and 15 Plus finally lose the SIM card tray. So you will need to go digital if you do that. Apple Watch Series 9, what changed here? The S9 chip came with a double tap feature. Now, for those listening, it is the feature that you saw with the Apple AirPod Vision Pros, where you double tap your fingers and that clicks things for you. Basically, you get the same thing with the Watch Series 9 here. Now, after some reviewers have done some things, luckily doing this a little later, I got to see some reviews like that before coming and talking about what actually happened. They said it actually works fairly well. So this could be used to answer phone calls and phone calls just by tapping your two fingers together. I'm curious, with the AirPod Vision Pros, they're using vision to see that. Maybe they can sense it through your whatever, but I'm curious how many taps that you do or bump into things that do similar actions or feel similar to your fingers tapping together. And because there's no vision, your watch is more relying on the physical feeling of that coming through your wrist. So we'll have to see how that really works in the real world once people have it outside of just Apple's event center. But it will be cool to see what's going on there. And then the Apple Watch Ultra 2, another not super big update, but the S9 chip came there as well. New ultra wideband chip and Apple's brightest display ever, which I don't remember exactly, but I believe it goes from 1 hertz all the way up to 3,000 nits. Sorry, 1 nit up to 3,000 nit. I'm not paying attention because I am the best at this. So not too many major improvements here. Now, the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 feature 64 gigs of storage for your music, because I don't know what the hell else you're storing on that. And then comes the software side of things. So what is Apple doing there? There's really not too much more to go about. So featuring standby mode, name drop, interactive widgets, and more coming to iOS 17, like we already knew was coming. There's really not much to talk about here. They didn't do too much new firmware for some devices. And other than that, it's a relatively boring Apple event. It's like Type-C was their thing this year. That's the big thing to talk about, but we pretty much expected that. It's kind of a boring iPhone year, which is strange to see happen. I guess we're going to find out. Next year, I would expect to maybe see some more change or something along those lines, but really, really a boring year for iPhones. And I think Apple's kind of hitting the limitation of what everyone else is hitting, which there's a limitation to how much you can change the devices at this point and keep the rectangle handheld thing. So another boring year of iPhones, but Type-C. So if you were holding off on an update until you can make sure all your devices charged with Type-C, you got that opportunity now because Apple has been forced to and chose to do it finally.